This is a disclaimer for the podcast. Please be mindful and respectful of everyone's opinion on and off the podcast. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the podcast are solely the speaker's own and not IDEP's. The podcast may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to suicide, abuse, violence, severe mental illness, incarceration, drugs, and poverty. This podcast is meant as a learning opportunity for everyone involved, and opinions expressed can change at any time. Thank you, and please enjoy the podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to IDEP's podcast called The Other Side of the Truth. In this podcast, we'll be talking about a lot of issues that's affecting the community and also the young people. I am Bakita and I am a peer leader at IDEP. I'm also a nursing major at Seattle Pacific University.
Hi guys, my name is Sam. I'm a professional creator. I like dancing, is my movement. I'm proud to be here.
Hi guys, my name is Ashley and I'm very excited to be part of this podcast. I am a youth leader of IDEP and I'm also a student at St. Martin University and I'm 19 years old.
So Kevin, I'm going to start with you. If you could please give us a brief description of what incarceration is and some examples of incarceration.
Now, incarceration is the confinement of when we talk of youth incarceration, we refer to the detention of youths in prisons or prison-like facilities.
And do you mind giving some examples of what could lead a youth to be incarcerated?
Yes. Now, we have some youths who become involved with a juvenile justice system because they get accused of committing a delinquent or a criminal act. We have other youths who are encounter the system for status offenses or actions that are illegal only because of a youth's age, such as the underage drinking or running away from home.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to you, Ashley. What do you think are some diversion programs that are being offered to discharged incarcerated youth?
I think some programs that could be offered could be life skill programs, and that's how you can take off their mind off of what happened, and that can start from poetry, singing, art, anything to take their mind off of what happened, but you can also offer them services where they're comfortable enough to speak of what happened and maybe advise other young people. And it doesn't have to be like therapy. It can also be like a circle of trust where it can just be different people coming together to talk. And in that circle, they could find out, oh, I like singing, I like poetry, I like doing this. Yeah. And together they can learn to move back into society.
Okay, so to add on to that, do you think there is enough services being offered? You said services such as involving them in hobbies, things that they like. Do you think there's enough services being offered to these people?
No, I do not think there is enough services being offered as of now, but I would hope to see more being offered, like some of them that I listed, and not like therapy, because I think those are what is offered, or like a mental health institution. I think more like programs that's like are what I listed.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a question, Sam. She says she doesn't think there's enough services being offered to these incarcerated youth. Do you think that could be a reason why there's a lot of rising cases in juveniles and all that?
Yeah. I can say that's a very, very, very interesting topic. And the main root of the cause is actually mental health. And you look at the situation that's happening right now, the youth are actually struggling to communicate and how they could come up and seek for help. And I think mental health as an issue, you have to tackle first the root, and that's the root first. Yeah.
Okay. So, Kevin, you did give us some examples of crimes that could lead youth to be incarcerated or to be in juvenile. What does accountability mean to you? Because there is a lot of debate on if we should end juvenile detention centers, and if we should, what does accountability mean to you? And also, what should accountability mean to the incarcerated youth who should be released?
Accountability will refer to taking responsibility for our behaviors. The youth must be accountable. They must take responsibility for their behavior. Accountability is a model that takes different forms. And in the most juvenile justice systems, it's interpreted as punishment or adherence to a set of rules laid down by the system rather. Now, taking full responsibility will require that we understand how the behavior has affected other human beings, how the behavior has influenced the community, for example. We must acknowledge that the behavior resulted from a choice that could have been made differently. We must also acknowledge that all affected. We must also acknowledge the people who were affected, and that the behaviors were harmful to them. And we must be willing to take actions to repair the harm we've done in the communities or the people affected. And we must be willing to make changes necessary to avoid these behaviors from reoccurring.
Okay. So, on top of that, do you think the community should also be involved in a young person's life who's trying to take accountable of his actions? Do you think the community should be involved?
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to youth crimes and finding ways to deter this, there are two very key objectives here. And one is to deter the crime, and number two is to rehabilitate that young person. And the best approach, I believe, to resolve this and achieve this deterrence and rehabilitation is community-based. So yes, community-based programs, initiatives, and processes are what we need to support our young people, not only prevent crimes from reoccurring, but also help rehabilitate these young people.
Okay. Do you feel like, because there's a lot of young people who commit crimes and end up being charged as adults, do you feel like that's reasonable? And also, do you feel like there should be a boundary that separates who gets to be charged as adults and who doesn't get to be charged as adults?
Yes, it's not fair to charge a youth as an adult. Okay. Now, understanding the proper response to delinquent youth must begin with the apprehension of the fact that young person or that youth is vulnerable. The youth is a vulnerable group. Understanding that the youth are in a critical process of physical, behavioral, cognitive, and emotional growth and change. And many are experiencing a growth spurt that can be extremely challenging. And at this stage, they need support and guidance more than anything. And this is where we must consider alternatives to youth detention or incarceration. Now, scientific studies will show, or have shown, that the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is responsible for the decisions we make, thinking, reasoning, and regulating our emotions, does not fully develop until we're about 25. Now, the confinement of youth like adults is not only unfair, but you see it's also unjust here. Right. It is what I call misapplied jurisprudential mandate.
Wow.
I can add up to that.
Yeah.
And also, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense on judging both a young person and old, because the young person is experiencing a lot of things, and harassment is part of it, being inside the cells they are, and it's so uncomfortable for someone young enough to see people being locked up, just because it's not a good picture to show actually for a young person that this is where I belong if I've done wrong, you know. They need to, there's life more in front of that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to add on to what Sam is saying, especially if they're young. They're looking at people older than them,
Yeah.
like he said, harassment. That will lead to them doing what they think is right because that's what they're seeing. And also, before charging them with said crime, look at what is behind that. Like, what's their home situation? What could lead to them doing that? What was happening around them? The school situation? And then decide. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a general question to any of you, if any of you can answer. He talked about having alternatives instead of, sending a young person to juvenile or to jail. Do you think having alternatives and diversion programs are the same thing? And if so, why would you think?
Yeah. Now, we currently have diversion programs in very many settings, and the purpose of diversion programs is to try and redirect delinquent youth from the justice system through programs and programs that include supervision and support. Now, some of the arguments that support the diversion programs include diverting who have committed minor offenses away from the system and towards community-based treatment. And also the understanding that formally processing young people through the juvenile justice systems does more harm than good by perpetuate delinquency through a stigmatizing or labeling process. Now, there's also the cost of community-based services and diversion programs that is significantly less than the cost of incarcerating these young people in detention centers or prisons.
Do you mind adding on? Do you feel like they're the same thing? I feel like they're the same thing. Diversion and alternatives?
Yeah, I do think they're the same thing. And I think diversion programs, especially, which is part of what I talked on before, they divert them from repeating the same mistake. And I think alternative is a good word to use for that.
Okay. Kevin, you used the word delinquent youth while talking about this topic. Do you mind educating the community on what that really means and why we should use it rather than using other words to label them?
It does not have to be identified as delinquent or delinquency. It's just another term for a juvenile offender. So when I use the term a delinquent youth, I simply mean a youthful person who has committed an offense. So it can be interchanged.
Okay.
It does not have to be one or the other.
Okay.